Hi, I'm Natalie Nodowitz, and welcome to part 2 of Family is the Smallest Form of Politics. Now, before we get started, a quick disclaimer first. This series uses politics on a global scale and uses broad strokes to draw comparisons on abstract ideas. I'd ask you to keep in mind during this presentation that America is not the only country in the world, and to better understand this metaphor, do not think of the American Civil War, but rather the hundreds of civil wars that have occurred across the globe over the course of history of time. Now that we view households as nations, with parents as political leaders and children as citizens, what happens when there's an internal conflict? A divide in leadership, or maybe a party wants to secede? The answer is civil war. There is no doubt that conflict in general has negative effects for those involved, but a particular parallel can be drawn between the battles of a divorce and the battles of a war. Managing partner of Bailey Riley law firm, attorney Roberta Bailey, wrote of the warlike elements of divorce in her article, Will Your Divorce Be a War Story or a Peace Story? She compared the spouses to war generals and their lawyers to soldiers, carrying out their orders and escalating tensions in hopes of winning. However, she points out that this can be damaging, saying that it frames the ex-spouse as an enemy and introduces a war into their home. She concluded, quote, "War is hell. Don't let your divorce turn into a long, messy quagmire from which neither side will be able to extricate itself. Not only is it unlikely that you will feel you've actually won, but the wounds from the battle can last forever." Similarly, family law attorney and author Joran Jenkins wrote extensively on this metaphor in her book, War or Peace? Avoid the Destruction of Divorce, highlighting the impact of the decisions made by both parties. She warns that if divorce is approached aggressively, it can result in, quote, destruction and virtual bloodshed, and how much like a war, peace agreements require negotiations in order to avoid further permanent casualties. Daedalus published a quarterly journal on civil wars and global disorder, threats and opportunities that studied and highlighted the complex and everlasting negative effects that civil wars worldwide have on its nation and those surrounding it. This includes mass casualty, financial devastation, and an increase in crime, poverty, and mental health issues. These findings are also supported by the article called The Civilian Consequences of Conflict, released by the Council on Foreign Relations. Interestingly enough, these consequences resemble that of divorce. The article called A Guide on the Impact of Divorce on Communities found that divorce, quote, has a significant impact on individuals, families, and whole communities. It can cause emotional distress, feelings of guilt or regret, financial strain, and a breakdown in family dynamics. It may also lead to increased crime rates, poverty levels, and lower levels of education. So now let's take a closer look at this metaphor. We have a nation divided. The leaders are in disagreement, but the commoners are just bystanders, now forced to choose sides, much like children. In early stages, the two parties will likely use tactics to entice support or loyalty from their citizens, such as bribery, aka buying your kids' love, to make their party more appealing. Another common tactic is the use of propaganda to influence citizens and villainize the opposition, even if the message is false or exaggerated. The propaganda can be offensive or confusing for its citizens, encouraging polarization. War and divorce is financially devastating, forcing changes in resources available to its citizen as funds are channeled for military support. So this means you might lose the house, sell that car, cancel Timmy's piano lessons, take a second job, or cancel that vacation. Much like war, divorce for most people means debt. So, in comes support from outside nations. How can you do it all alone? Allies can include grandparents, aunts and uncles, family friends, and sometimes, dun dun dun, step-parents. Although it's not always bad, we must acknowledge that the introduction of new authority and influence results in a culture and power shift for citizens. New management is not always kindly received and can cause further tension, especially if the citizens feel like they didn't really have a say in the matter. Some nations may even lose their citizens' allegiance. As attorneys Bailey and Jenkins wrote, lawyers are the most common yet most destructive support. Much like general officers or war strategists, their purpose is to go into combat and defeat the enemy, escalating tension and financial devastation. However, as Bailey and Jenkins also wrote, some lawyers can serve as regulators and moderators, fostering a settlement between both parties. We know that wars really only have two outcomes. The first outcome is victory and defeat. Someone wins and someone loses. That may mean someone won custody and someone lost it. Someone won allegiance and someone lost it. Someone stayed and someone moved away. The parties were unable to come to agreement and one nation had to be dissolved. But as history's shown, that doesn't always have to be that way. The second outcome is a treaty. Through strategic negotiations, a mutual agreement can be found that respectfully and realistically benefits your nation and the other mutually. However, these require work, finesse, and humility, which is hard because we are so human and divorce is complicated. The treaty can mean a reconciliation of a marriage. For some, it can mean peace between two nations that now coexist or co-parent, allowing their citizens to have dual citizenship, moving freely between both nations. Relationships are messy, and breakups are messier. And if you think about it, divorces are the ultimate breakup. Nobody is perfect, people make mistakes, and so little is in our control. It's unfortunately in our nature to fight or fly, to dig our nails in a conflict or run away from it. However, not every conflict needs to be a battle, and sometimes the only way to get out of something is to go through it. That's what I meant to say. Discovering the sources of these conflicts and keeping in mind that your actions have direct and lasting impacts is the first step to a decent long-term solution, which is the best outcome you can give to your little constituents. Thank you for tuning in, and hang in there because there will be a part 3 of Family is the Smallest Form of Politics coming soon. Thank you for watching.